Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? We're a little bit late today, Monday, July 18th, 2016. A little bit behind schedule because, I don't know. I joined the Republican Party and I'm on my way to their convention. No, unconvincing. Arrested for having tennis balls outside the Republican convention? It's possible. I haven't left. I'm at my house. Don't worry about it. Big day today in the household. Basketball camp this week, which requires always making it a close shave as between drop-off times that are acceptable there, and getting back to the microphone. Plus, of course, the big news that Judy Vincent has been waiting for, the return of son number one from Northern Tier High Adventure Camp in Ely, Minnesota, or at least that's where the base was, and they paddled all their way up into our neighbors to the north in Canada, and had a great time, and he's exhausted, and trying to find out what happened. I don't know what happened. But he's alive, he made it back. Doesn't look emaciated or anything like that. But between that and racing around for the basketball camp, I am at the microphone without coffee and without breakfast. This is very difficult. And so I'm hoping that when Greg comes around today, he'll give me a chance to run over to the counter and at least pour a cup of this coffee. I took an extra minute or two before coming on the air to actually start the coffee going. I know you'll all forgive me for that one. And, we'll help get grounded in some way or another by getting back on track. Okay, this morning, what can we talk about? Let's see, I think I have to start almost disregarding whether or not we're under a mass shooting cloud, because it's happening every day. But, of course, we had that incident over the weekend. It was yesterday. Baton Rouge had its latest brush with the troubles, I guess, as we'll begin to call them. And in other troubling news, Republican National Convention begins today, and I discovered last night and tweeted around, and it looks like it's making the rounds again this morning. Geert Wilders. Does he say Wilders? I don't know. I say Wilder because it's crazy sounding. The racist nut from the Netherlands is here in the United States as a guest of the Tennessee Republican Party at the Republican National Convention. Racists from all over the world, xenophobes from all over the world, which is an amazing thing, actually. How do you have an international xenophobe convention? Should be theoretically impossible, but it is happening, and everybody is interested in the fact that it is happening. Greg is here. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Hey, I called so you can get some coffee.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. You know what? I want to talk to you for a minute or two, and then I'll turn around and pour some. Or should I just go now? I don't know.
Just go now.
All right.
It's late. So
I'll
just
read your
go
stories
get some coffee.
On the Skype. Okay, thank you. I'll be right back, everybody.
Yeah, while he does that, let me just tell you what we're going to talk about today a little bit is the pundit roundup. A lot of folks are traveling back and forth from Netroots Nation in St. Louis, and there have been some fantastic pieces that came out of there. One of the best, one of my favorites, is friend of the show, Arliss Bunny and Will McLeod on Hopping Mad. And this morning they put out a podcast where they interviewed Tom Jensen, pollster for PPP, Public Policy Polling, and asked him all sorts of questions about how they do their polls, how they get their answers, and had a wonderful segment about how you come up with some of those really weird questions. And Tom reminded us that it was the Daily Coast Netroots folks that first asked him to ask the birther question, which turned out to be famously important because it turned out there are a lot of birthers in the Republican Party. And even now, when he asks about things like, are you worried about a giant meteor hitting the Earth and would you vote for him? It tells us something about the underlying electorate. So I think all of that is important. So hopefully David will be back soon, and hopefully I'm still on the air. Who knows? But in the meantime, we're going to start with looking a little bit about some recent polling. There was a lot of polling pre-convention, and pretty much all of them, ABC, Washington Post, 4 points, and CNN 7 points, NBC, Wall Street Journal 5 points. All have Hillary Clinton in the lead, which I think is important to note prior to the convention, so we get to see a Pence and convention bounce by comparing to those particular numbers. One of the more interesting thing, though, is the Hispanic vote, and this came out with a new focusing on Hispanic vote number, and came out with Hillary Clinton 76 and Trump 14. And how that compares to other years, Barack Obama in 2012 beat Romney 71-27. In 2008, Obama beat McCain 67-31. And it was a little bit closer in 2004, carry over Bush 58-40. But 76-14 is historical. I think the closest anybody got to that maybe was 96. Clinton got 72%, Bob Dole 21. So if you're cleaning up with African American voters, there's a couple of state polls that couldn't find a percentage, that is to say 0%, maybe less than 1%, for Trump in some swing states.
Ah, the zeros.
Yeah, so if you have a very heavy African American vote for Clinton, and obviously according to this poll, 76-14 heavy for Clinton among Latinos, it becomes very difficult to win because the new NBC Wall Street Journal poll, for example, Stuart Stevens pointed this out. Romney got 62% of the white males with high school or less, and Trump could maybe make 65. But Romney won white women by 14, and Donald Trump is losing.
You can't say that. That doesn't work. I don't even understand the word losing when you say it.
Well, you can't say it to him, but you can say it to everybody else.
He'll smack the teeth out of your head with those tiny hands. Is he speaking every night?
It's the Trump family singers. I think that they have somebody.
They definitely have a Trump every night, but I thought I thought that it looked like the plan was coming together that Trump was actually going to take a spot and speak himself.
Well, that's all he got, right?
I mean, everybody else
can't
canceled.
entirely depend on Scott Baio.
Right. And millennials love Scott Baio. I looked this up just to be sure. I guess Charles in Charge went off the air when Ivanka was 9. So,
okay.
I just wanted to figure out, could it be, does she like him? I don't know where you even...
Anybody likes him.
Oh, it doesn't sound that way.
Anyway, Republican and conservative blogger Brandon Finnegan, another numbers guy, really into Pennsylvania, comparing RCP numbers from 11 other battlegrounds, Bush, McCain, Romney, or a combo of them, they were performing better than Trump in all of them. So you not only have the national polls saying that Clinton is ahead, but you also have virtually every battleground state poll showing Clinton is ahead. And there was a really interesting tweet sequence from Patrick Ruffini, again, a Republican, who was looking at some of the numbers and basically saying, look, if you look at the underlying numbers here, this is an incredibly stable race. I realize, he says, that networks don't like you to think that way.
Yes. Nor is the guy in the race stable, but okay.
But, he writes, what media should be doing is what campaigns do. Large N-size analytics tracking that would show underlying stability. Asked one of the chiefs of the networks why media didn't do this and said they were looking at it for 2016, but it hasn't materialized. He says, I get why they don't. Takes away the drama and shock value of swingy polls not rooted in the ground truth of the voter file. But in his opinion, Patrick Ruffini's opinion, this is a disservice to the public, would be much more insightful about when true magnitude of movement is seen. So, pretty stable race. It looks a lot, as Tom Jensen from PPP Polling says, it looks a lot like 2012. And that means that there's a solid Clinton lead. It's not a huge Clinton lead, but again, Ruffini points out that when you're looking at polls 100 days out, and we're just about there, we will be right after the conventions.
All right.
Yes. A 4 or 5 point lead is almost impossible to overcome. It sounds like a small number, but it's not. You can go from 8 to 4, but going from 4 to 0 is really hard. We know that, having tracked in 2004 the Kerry George W. Bush numbers. It was just so frustrating because Kerry was like only 3 points behind, but just couldn't quite catch them.
Yeah, those are some persistent. Well, we do settle into patterns here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, so
Okay.
there's with that. Yeah, sure. There's a lot of other news. What happened exactly in Baton Rouge is still kind of a bit of a mystery to me.
Yeah, can't straighten that out yet.
We still need a little bit more information. There's a lot of stuff floating around the internet. It's really hard to know what's true, what's not true. Sovereign nation stuff had been thrown out there. We know he was a Marine. Spent some time overseas, but I haven't really seen as of this morning. I haven't gone and checked all of that stuff. I was doing the polling stuff instead, so I really don't know where we're at with that. But like Orlando, and maybe even like Nice, France, everything gets called terrorism when in fact maybe it's not.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to wait.
It could be that if somebody happens to be a little bit mentally unstable, and we know the guy in Nice, France was.
Yes.
You may not, and even in Orlando, it may or may not have the wide, unless you're going to really hugely expand the definition of what's terrorism. It may turn out that a lot of this stuff's a whole lot more nuanced.
Yeah, I mean...
But that won't stop Trump from trying to scare the pants out of people and pretend he's Richard Nixon and go all law and order stuff.
Yeah, although, what a joke, law and order. The guy is bending, breaking, smashing the law. But the laws that don't matter.
I'm the law and order candidate. I know more about it than anybody else. I'm going to be indicted.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, like that. The law and order candidate who's scheduled to testify in his fraud trial immediately after the election.
Exactly.
That's the one I mean.
That's the one. That's what we mean by law and order.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see as the details emerge from Baton Rouge. But yes, and they probably will end up, even officially speaking, just expanding the definition of terrorism. The efforts to connect people to very nebulous terrorist networks by virtue of, well, he read their websites or something. I mean, at this point where you're getting into somebody who's maybe even borderline psychotic and trying to determine, did he think he was in contact with a terrorist network? Or, Son of Sam thought he was in contact with a dog. We don't think the dogs are a terrorist network. I don't know where you stop with, but I guess you have two mixed psychoses. One, the person who's the shooter, and two, the quasi-psychoses of trying to hammer everything into a terrorism box on the national security state side. So it's going to be confusing for some time.
Right. So right after Obama has a news conference saying, look, we really have to tone down the rhetoric. Right after that, Trump tweets, President Obama just had a news conference, but he doesn't have a clue. Our country is a divided crime scene, and it will only get worse.
Yeah.
Of course, they were English words mixed in with this word salad, but nobody exactly knew what it said.
Right.
Mark Salter, who is John McCain's ex-speechwriter, tweeted back, from a shining city on a hill to a divided crime scene, the vision of the standard bearer of the party of Reagan.
Although, to be honest, we've heard it. Yeah, you've heard it here on Kagro in the Morning for years. This is the Republican play. It's hyped up some. It's got a little steroids in it, but Republicans have campaigned as though America were a hellhole for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 elections. I don't know why they're so surprised. They're not doing it, is what it is.
Right. Huh. Exactly.
All right. They're wrong.
Yeah, anyway, so a lot there. We had the Donald Trump introduce Mike Pence as his running mate speech. Again, was about 25 minutes of word salad talking about himself. And, oh, by the way, Pence is here. And then after introducing him, Trump walked off the stage. Most bizarre thing. Ezra Klein has a piece on this, and he writes, I do not know how to explain what I just watched. Should be easy. Donald Trump introduced Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his running mate. There it is, one sentence, 11 words. But that doesn't explain what happened any better than I spent a few hours letting LSD mimic serotonin in my brain explains an acid trip. What just happened was weird, and it was important. Back in May, E.J. Dionne wrote that the hardest thing about covering Donald Trump would be staying shocked, watching him day after day, week after week, month after month. The temptation would be to normalize his behavior, to move Trump into the political mainstream, but today helped. Donald Trump's introduction to Mike Pence was shocking. Forget the political mainstream. What happened today sat outside the mainstream for normal human behavior.
Okay.
It was pretty good.
Yeah, and it got worse.
We got another one here. This is James Fallows writing on the same situation, watching that bizarre speech. I am again impressed by and grateful to the crew at C-SPAN, which has promptly put up a full high-res version of the Trump-Pence announcement ceremony that ended not long ago. You can see the whole thing, and they give the link. You probably need to see the whole thing from Trump's entry 10 seconds into the clip to his baton pass to Pence 28 minutes later to assess the claim I'm about to make, but here it goes. I think this event rivals and even surpasses his I hate mosquitoes speech described here in raising concern about Trump's basic fitness to govern at the temperamental and emotional level.
I hate mosquitoes. All right. I didn't see that one.
Yeah.
Wow. But I can
so
tell
that was pretty
good.
amazing.
Get that.
They're just, the whole thing is so bizarre.
It is.
The Ohio GOP delegation apparently is denied a traditional front row seat at the home state convention.
Right.
Instead, they go to the blue states, California, and Trump's New York. 2 states he's not going to win. My comment when I heard that was they don't need the front row. They can see the podium from their front porch.
Yes.
And Amy Freed, a political scientist in Maine, said, why not diss the Ohio delegation? It's not like an important state for the general election or anything.
Right. Besides which, it's headed by a weak loser, and he can't even do anything. Although, I don't know whether Trump wants him to do something. But I noticed over the weekend, post-Baton Rouge, some calls for Ohio to suspend its open carry laws around the convention. The police were asking for this because the police actually know that might make sense. But Kasich says, no, I can't do it. He's weak and he can't do it. It's not possible, quote-unquote possible.
Meanwhile, and you can't make this stuff up, this is a report in the New York Daily News confirmed by Donna Brazil. White elevator signs spotted at Republican National Convention.
Yes.
RNC organizers are scrambling to replace signs labeling a bank of elevators the white elevators. Donna said, I saw it but ignored it and used the stairs, but they were there.
Yes, I did see that tweeted over the weekend, and the insistence that they were being replaced by the staff there. I don't know what they're going to call it, but if they change it to Caucasian elevator, they don't get it.
So we talked a little bit about the Hispanic poll, the Latino poll, how 76-14 for Hillary compares historically. And Steve Beschloss wrote, Paul Manafort swears their Hispanic support is growing.
Oh, yeah.
Delusion is not a pathway to the White House. And Rick Wilson tweeted, quote, I also think I'm the Holy Roman Emperor, end quote, Paul Manafort. So
sure,
yeah, I think they've got a little bit of a delusion problem there. I think that's
to say
pretty
the
much.
least. Yeah, they do have that. Although, by the way, speaking of those advising Trump, I understand, and that I understand, but CNN does not understand that not only is Corey Lewandowski still being paid, we talked about that, maybe it's just a severance package, but apparently he's still advising Trump in some capacity. They still speak and talk strategy, and this has escaped CNN. New Yorker magazine, I think, picked up on it and reported it and said, how CNN missed the story, I do not know. But Jay Rosen is asking that question.
Yeah, a pretty good question to ask. By the way, I don't know if you heard, but there was this fantastic 1964 ad, Confessions of a Republican, which is just a guy talking straight to the camera saying that I was a Republican, but in this particular year I just can't vote for Barry Goldwater. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a very famous ad, very, very a serious, sober discussion about how this particular Republican cannot vote for Barry Goldwater. So they found this guy. Rachel Maddow interviewed him. And today there's a Hillary ad out called Confessions of a Republican Updated. Same guy in 2016, rather, explaining how come he cannot vote for Donald Trump and how you have to take him seriously when he talks about nut job stuff.
I guess so. Historic level.
Yeah, so it's for those political junkies who are into this stuff, it's actually fascinating.
Yes. So I guess if they get underway tonight, that would be about Do you know what the coverage is going to be like? 8
I don't know if they're going to. It starts earlier, but they may only tune in around 10 o'clock or so. I'm not sure that they're going to cover gavel the way they used to.
CNN will, or C-SPAN rather, will probably.
C-SPAN will. Yeah, you can always find it if you want to watch it.
Yeah.
I like to watch. You like to watch the Watchers. I'm not sure I can stomach it.
Yeah, I mean, if Trump speaks every night, I assume I'll see it, but perhaps on YouTube.
Even if you don't watch, you're going to see it because they're going to replay it ad nauseum. So I think maybe I'll just read about it the next day.
True. I guess I'll also add that heaping disaster on disaster. Not only was the Pence announcement just bizarre, but the 60 Minutes thing.
Yeah, that was pretty bad too. So, look, I mean, all of the parameters are out there. 40% of the public is going to vote Republican regardless. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I guess
it makes no difference to them. They don't care who's running. They're going to vote. Let's look a little bit in detail about the NBC Wall Street Journal poll to see why. This is a very stable poll. It was 5 points before the FBI stuff with the emails, and it's 5 points now. A lot of the pre-post polls have basically shown just about the same. There's been some tightening. You can pick up in polls like this one that people were not happy about the whole email thing, but that's not necessarily affecting their vote. So, for example, we have positive negatives. You take the positive and then you subtract the negative and you see what you get. And Bernie Sanders fans will be happy to hear that he is the most positive thing along with the FBI at positive 13. Barack Obama is a plus 9. Black Lives Matter movement is plus 4. So it has positive view in how people view it. 38, 34. 38 positive, 34 negative. Elizabeth Warren is plus 1. Paul Ryan is minus 2. Bush minus 2. Democratic Party minus 2. Bill Clinton minus 5. Shouldn't have gotten on that plane with Lynch.
Yes.
Let's see. Newt Gingrich is a minus 7. Mitt Romney's a minus 15. Seen as a turncoat by the Republican Party. Chris Christie's a minus 22, tying Hillary Clinton with that. The Republican Party's a minus 24, and Donald Trump is a minus 33.
Oh, boy.
So people fully understand Trump is a loser. I mean, they get it. The question is what they're going to do about it. So right now, Democrat vote is 46, Republican vote is 41 for whether I'd like to see a Democrat or a Republican. And then when you put names on it, Clinton 46, Donald Trump 41. And then if you ask the question, if I know you don't prefer them, but if Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were the only candidates on the ballot and you had to make a choice today, who would you vote for?
Yes.
Clinton gets 32, Trump gets 27, and not sure is 41. Now, that not sure, what are they going to do? Some of them won't vote. Some of them will vote third party. But Tom Jensen from PPP has been asking in a different poll a really interesting question, and that is, what if the choice were between Clinton and Trump and he gets around a 4-point lead? What if it were Obama versus Trump? And it's more like a 9-point lead for Obama. And the 4-point lead was for Clinton.
Yeah.
And he makes the point that given that, the pool of probably in the end holding their nose and voting for Clinton is probably pretty big. And in fact, Nate Cohen over the weekend had a really interesting, not Nate Silver, but Nate Cohen from the New York Times, had a very interesting dialogue about that, which I put up on the Saturday Pundit Roundup, and see if I could just find that fairly quickly.
Okay.
But he basically pointed out that there's a lot of people that just really are not quite ready to make up their mind. And here it is, asked about it. He's talking with Tony Malkovich from the New York Times. And Nate says, I agree that racial polarization would be bad for the Democrats, but Trump isn't doing much better than Romney among white voters, if at all. He's losing as many well-educated white voters as he's gaining among less educated white voters. I think Clinton's polling numbers may be particularly vulnerable to these sorts of fluctuations in the media environment. She's counting on the support of a lot of people who simply don't like her very much. I'd guess a lot of them know deep down they'll support her eventually, but right now, the act of telling a pollster they intend to support someone they don't really want to support might be fairly agonizing.
Yeah.
And Tony said, well, election 16, fairly agonizing. That's a pretty great summation. And Nate says, one further thought on this. I think it's relevant that Clinton is falling in the polls more than Trump is gaining. Why? Because we know these voters who supported Clinton, even in modestly more favorable conditions. There's no way to be sure they'll return to her side, but surely they're more likely to revert to her in a more neutral media climate than support Trump. So Trump will get a bump in the polls. And Clinton, I think, has already taken the hit from the emails. I don't see that it's going to go too much further. And that's, again, if you're looking at the issues, and this has been asked in other polls too, people think Clinton bends the rules. People think Trump is a racist and a xenophobe. Those are not equal sins. Yeah. So in the end, you wind up having Clinton with a lead, and that's why I think she's going to wind up in the end winning the election.
Boy, I hope so. I mean, I do.
But, that's the data summary for today. That's what's out there. That's what we can glean from this. There's other interesting things in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll. They just ask a lot of interesting questions. For example, in general, as a general rule, the United Party wins, the divided party loses. So they ask, are you satisfied that Hillary Clinton is a Democratic nominee? Would you have preferred the Democratic Party nominated somebody else? Satisfied, 54. Would have preferred someone else, 45. Ask the same question of Republicans. Satisfied that Trump is a nominee, 38. Would have preferred somebody else, 60.
Yeah, okay. Today's the convention.
Right. Again, so what does it mean when somebody says, I don't necessarily like that person, and I have issues with this and I have issues with that, but I'm voting for them?
I'm not sure. I mean,
it means I'm voting for them.
Yeah. Oh, okay. you were being literal too.
Yeah.
I can't find a deeper meaning, but okay. What is it? Oh,
there isn't a deeper meaning. I mean, you can't. Look at these unfavorables. They mean everything. Actually, no, they don't. Who you're going to vote for actually is more important, and who you think is going to win is even more important than that right now. And so don't go nuts with these numbers. But at the same time, the angst in the Republican Party is real enough so that you have, for example, the whole national security sector saying, "I can't vote for Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, I'm voting for Hillary Clinton." Now, not everybody's going to come to that conclusion. A lot of Republicans will hold their nose and vote. I'm just interested. The usual benchmark these days, and it isn't like historic forever. It's only the last couple of elections since 2000. But generally, 90% of Republicans will vote for the Republican, and 90% of the Democrats will vote for the Democrats. And I'm really interested to see if the Republicans will get 90% this year, or whether it'll be an 89, 88, and it'll drop a little bit.
Yeah, I would imagine it would with the ad out and so many people. I could
but what happens is they stop calling themselves Republicans.
Yes, that's true too.
It gets hard to really know, but it'll be really, really fascinating.
Yeah, many things will.
Here's another one.
Okay.
Regardless of how you feel today, this is the NBC Wall Street Journal poll.
I don't even care.
During the Democratic nominating contest earlier this year, would you have described yourself as a supporter of Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, or did you have no strong preference between the two?
Mm-hmm.
In June, the numbers were supporter of Hillary Clinton 34, Bernie Sanders 40, no strong preference 25, which surprised me.
Yes.
Now, in July, supporter of Hillary Clinton 39, supporter of Bernie Sanders 38, and no strong preference 22. So it's an interesting number. Both candidates still have a lot of support within the Democratic Party, but the fact that Sanders supporters actually outnumbered Clinton supporters a month ago was surprising. Of course, it didn't change the numbers about Trump versus Clinton.
No.
People want change. They would prefer somebody who brings major changes, 56 to 41 over steady approach. And if somebody won, would you feel optimistic and confident if they were elected president? Satisfied and hopeful, uncertain and wondering, pessimistic and worried? They didn't ask jump off a bridge. So Hillary Clinton, July 2016, optimistic and confident 18, satisfied and hopeful 23. So that's 41 total. And Donald Trump, optimistic and confident 12. Satisfied and hopeful 21.
Well,
So if he wins, 33% of the public will be okay with that. I mean, you look at these numbers and say, this is why the numbers are so stable.
Well, yeah. Many people are pretty sure they do not like him.
Yeah.
We've had plenty of opportunity to find out. He keeps, I don't know if you've noticed, in the media, he keeps talking. So there's a pretty good sample to draw from out there.
Right. Here's an interesting one. Which candidate do you think is the right judgment to make a good president?
Okay.
Only Hillary Clinton? Only Donald Trump? Both or neither?
Oh,
Okay.
me? Am I on? Okay.
Let me just ask you to guess. What do you think both of them?
Both of them? That may be zero. Now that I've seen
It's
zero.
5,
component.
actually.
Okay.
It's pretty low.
I mean, yeah. Normally I would never say zero, except
Right.
as a joke. Except
5%.
5%. That's a zero, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Only Hillary Clinton 37. Only Donald Trump 25. Both of them 5. Neither of them 32.
Hmm.
Not sure one. That 32 is pretty low.
Yeah.
Back in 2008, when McCain and Obama were running, that 32 number, neither of them, that was 6.
Hmm. Okay.
So definitely negative campaigning this year.
Yeah.
Now, when you're talking about the parties, would you say that this party is unified, fairly unified, somewhat unified, or not unified? From the Democratic Party, 49% fairly unified or very unified, and for the Republican Party, 13.
Nope. Yeah.
And not only 13, that number's been dropping from previous years.
I mean, go from
In 2008, for example, very unified for the Democrats was 11. This year it's 20. For the Republican Party in 2008, it was 16. This year it's 3. Even Republicans don't see the Republican Party as particularly unified. Again, go back to the unified party generally wins.
It's impossible to see it. I mean, with the number of people, just all we have to do is look at the convention. Nobody's going to this convention. Kasich is not going to this convention. It's in his state. So.
Right. When it comes to approaches to issue, do you think this candidate is in the mainstream or generally out of step with most Americans?
Okay.
So Barack Obama, July 2016. In the mainstream, 52, out of step 45.
Okay.
All right, that pretty much sets the baseline.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton in the mainstream, 50, out of step 47. Democrats for Congress, 48, 42. Donald Trump, 40 mainstream, 57% out of step. And Republican candidates for Congress, 31% in the mainstream, 59% out of step.
Yes, everyone should remember that the troubles do not stop with Donald Trump.
Right. So overall, kind of interesting. Now, here's an interesting one. You might find this especially interesting. Thinking about the Democratic Party in general, which one or two of the following areas do you think the Democratic Party is most out of the mainstream and where it needs to change? Highest percentage? Fiscal issues such as taxing and spending. Don't forget, in a regular, average, everyday, normal campaign, people want less taxes and more services. And if you can't promise that, they don't like you.
Yeah.
So fiscal issues came in at 30%. Guns came in at 26%. Out of step, Democratic Party.
Oh. Okay.
But if you ask the same question, and then third is immigration at 17% and trade is 10%. Racial issues at 10%. So the big issue there is taxes and spending, traditional things.
Okay, sure.
Right? If you ask that of Republican, what is the one thing you're out of the mainstream with and needs to make changes? Guns, 24. That's the top issue that people think Republicans are wrong and need to change on. And then next to that is racial issues at 18, immigration 17.
Well, that is pretty amazing.
Pretty
That's
interesting.
an opportunity.
Whereas fiscal issues, taxing and spending is 17.
Oh, they're great.
Yeah, they're fine.
Sure.
Don't spend any
Terrific.
money and give me lots of services.
Yeah. In fact, don't spend so much money. Give away the money that we've got so that,
Right. Here's another one. Again,
All
this
right.
is going to be interesting going down the road. If you're trying to get into people's heads and say, what are you thinking? What are the big picture things you're sort of seeing? It's not hatred of the Democratic Party. It's not hatred of Obama. As a matter of fact, it's not even the economy. This one says, which of these best describes your view of the economy during Barack Obama's presidency? The economy is improved, and I give Barack Obama some credit for it. 49%.
Okay.
The economy is improved, but I do not give Barack Obama much credit for it. 15.
Oh.
And the economy is not improved at all. 36.
All right. Well, there's always that.
Right. So there's your 49-49 split right there between the economy's improved and I give Obama credit.
Right.
And either it has improved, but he didn't do it, or it hasn't improved is an equal number. But those aren't bad numbers for the president.
No, I mean, that's, actually, remarkably stable over 8 years, which is the way we were talking about earlier, except...
Yeah, as a matter of fact, if you look at the Bill Clinton trend on this in 96, economy has improved, and I give Bill Clinton some credit for it, 28. Economy has improved, and I don't give Clinton credit for it, 23. And the economy has not really improved, 47. So people are happier about the economy now than when Clinton was running for re-election.
How about the economy has improved, and I don't understand what the economy is?
Well, that's part of it. That's why we have people like Arliss and Will to explain it to us. But at the same time, it's funny, you know. I don't understand what Donald Trump's appeal is to white working class voters. It must be the economy.
Yes,
Really?
right. Oh, economic.
No other issues,
insecurity.
economic issues. Right? It's got nothing to do with white identity, race, or anything like that. It's all economics.
Yep. It's all economic insecurity.
Yeah, except people actually, for the most part, agree. 49 plus 15, that's pretty good. 64% say the economy's actually improved.
Okay. They're largely right.
Yeah, they are. And yet, still considering Trump anyway, it's more than the economy, folks.
Yeah.
A little sexism, a little racism.
A little bit of everything.
But you're not allowed to talk about those things.
Okay. Oh, well, I don't know. I'm trying to scan for any... I don't see anything really super breaking news except,
Change.
Lots more... a lot of profiles of Trump out today. Like, I don't know what you would call them. Sort of like second-level, one-off meta profiles circulating today, which I gather we'll spend a little bit of time on.
Biopics.
Yeah. It's amazing what's coming out today.
In case you've never heard of him, this is a guy who's going to be nominated today, and we news people feel like you need to know.
But there's some really interesting angles on him. There's this, have you seen some of these? The McKay Coppins one? Has that crossed your
No, but
desk?
I've been reading him all along.
Sure.
I got a follow-up on that, but what do you got from McKay?
Let's see. What his piece today is, I guess, among his peers in journalism and elsewhere, I guess in the Beltway, the general feeling is that he's the reason we're stuck with Trump. That 2 years ago, he wrote a profile of Trump and then concluded at the end that he wouldn't run for president because basically, he loves his lifestyle and he's just not willing to give that kind of stuff up, and he's just not serious, and he's not doing any of the things you need to do to run for president. And Trump he clearly was. He was definitely insulted by the piece, and he spent, as he usually does, the next couple weeks talking at every opportunity about what a piece of garbage McKay Coppins was and how he's a loser.
So it's McKay Coppins' fault. I thought it was Obama's fault for insulting him during the,
people are laying that on him too, but Obama's going to go away, and McKay Coppins isn't. So I guess they're going to. But among journalists, they literally are blaming him. They apparently at some point he said, when the race starts in earnest, I'd really like to maybe do a different beat. I don't want to do the Trump beat. And people were like, you got him into this. You're going to stick with him. You're going to ride this out. You're going to pay for this. They honestly believe that he goaded him into running. Like personally. This is, which is very strange.
It is. But, so speaking of journalists, here's a little more serious view. And this is from Columbia Journalism Review. So these are very serious people. There. Capitalize that. For journalists covering Trump, a Murrow moment.
Oh?
As Edward R. Murrow wrapped up his now famous special report condemning Joseph McCarthy in '54, he looked into the camera and said words that could apply today. He didn't create this situation of fear. He merely exploited it, and rather successfully, Murrow said of McCarthy. Most of Murrow's argument relied on McCarthy's own words, but in the end, Murrow shed his journalistic detachment to offer a prescription. This is no time for men who oppose Senator McCarthy's methods to keep silent or for those who approve. He said, we cannot defend freedom abroad by deserting it at home. After months of holding back, modern-day journalists are acting a lot like Murrow, pushing explicitly against Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican presidential nominee. To be sure, these modern-day Murrow moments carry less impact. Long gone are the days in which a vast majority of eyeballs were tuned into the big three television news programs, but we nonetheless are witnessing a change from existing practice of steadfast detachment, and the context in which journalists are reacting is not unlike Murrow. The candidate's comments fall outside acceptable societal norms, and critical journalists are not alone in speaking up. And they talk about it started when Kay Coppins was doing this and getting crap for it, but from Fox News' Megyn Kelly during the August 2015 GOP presidential debate, and she listed some of the awful things Trump had said about women, and journalists began to become more adversarial, and then he cites Anderson Cooper, and others follow suit. Of course, in my opinion, not even close to enough. It's kind of weird reading this and thinking, why are you congratulating yourselves for doing like 1% of what you should have been doing? But, it's still interesting. The sphere of consensus is the inner circle, the place in which most people tend to agree. Most American journalists and news consumers would agree on the legitimacy of the government as embodied in the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and amendments, and talks about the ideas and words of Trump are causing journalists to change their role. To understand this, it's useful to look briefly at theoretical construction of objectivity, and so we have deviance from that. And so this author, who is David Mindich, says he feels we've reached a turning point. So he's a professor of media studies, journalism, and digital arts at St. Michael's College in Vermont, used to be an assignment editor for CNN, and thinks that this point going further, we're going to see a lot more objectivity dropped about Trump and a little bit more calling him out. And so it'll be very interesting to see if that actually happens. Color me skeptical. I got to see it for me to believe it, but it'd be nice to believe that that's in fact the case. Well,
I think that would be nice. I'm with you.
Anyway, that's my roundup for today. Hope you had a chance to have a little coffee. Maybe not enough time for breakfast.
I decided to Irish it.
Something. And we'll round up some more stuff, and we'll be back tomorrow. We'll have another day of the Republican National Convention with people sweating it out as to, am I really with this guy? Are people taking pictures? Do I have to, in public, support him?
Yeah.
We shall see.
You got to stand on the stage with him. That's the deal.
But we'll see what else happens, and we'll be back tomorrow. We'll do it again.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Greg. Thanks so much.
All righty.
For allowing
Take
me
care.
To pour that coffee. Thank you. You too the same. And I really did. I decided, said, I'm under such stress here. We're going to Irish this coffee today. I bought some nice Bailey's Irish cream over the weekend. And another bottle of my favorite, by the way, Catoctin Creek Organic Rye. I didn't put any of that in the coffee. I don't need that. The Bailey's does the trick. But fun weekend for consumption of adult beverages. I thought, bought the Catoctin Creek. I've been using that to make mint julep, since the mint is growing so well in the backyard. And I was at the discount wine, Eric W. Trump's effing delicious discount wine hut over the weekend. Looking for, they had some nice, I wanted to skip a step. Initially, I was going to leave the mint alone for a little bit longer. I got mint-infused simple syrup to skip the step, but then I decided, I use the real mint. It's actually looking pretty good, and I can take some out without endangering the plants at this point. But they had mint julep, those actual stainless steel mint julep cups for sale, $5.97. So I picked one up because I'm such a fancy guy. And I understand. I know there's going to be some purists who say you can't. It's not a mint julep. You didn't make it with Kentucky bourbon. That's just the basic rule. But as it turns out, I read on the internet, people are very specific about these things, very, pedantic about these things on the internet. And depending on who you read, first of all, they fight for hours and for pages and pages over whether it's permissible. Is it enough to use crushed ice? No, it needs to be shaved ice or, pulverized ice for them. People fight on message boards about this endlessly. But apparently, Marylanders, it is said, I mean, I guess traditionally you must be talking about going back to, I don't know, pre-Civil War days. I don't know. When did anybody ever distinguish between the way Kentuckians and Marylanders made mint juleps? I don't know how far back in history this goes, but Marylanders use rye. So just so you know, there is at least one place where that's a legit mint julep. Anyway, it was great because the Catoctin Creek is a great ingredient, and it made things very pleasant. So between that and the Irish coffee over the weekend, I'm pretty pleased with the purchases. Anyway, I just thought I'd fill you in on that. Like I said, other stories to come about my eldest's adventures in Minnesota and Canada and the border waters, but it's difficult to get anything out of a 15-year-old. How was the trip? Good. He was gone for 10 days. He's on the water for 7. They paddled all over creation. He hadn't been indoors in a week. How was it? Good. Did you have a good time? Yeah. Was it worth going? Uh-huh. So that's basically it. That's all I know so far. Mosquitoes, as expected, terrible. And apparently, in case you're ever considering a trip like this or camping out like this, and I mean, when I say camping out, what we're really talking about is, gosh, we've been out here for a couple of days, and you know how camp food is, and apparently also the iodine in water purification tablets does a little bit of a number on you, and very often when he goes camping, he tries the best he can. He's usually away for a weekend, or occasionally for a week at Boy Scout camp, where you're not always out of doors, but mostly outdoors. But, you know, they got latrines, and though they're unpleasant, they're at least facilities. Not so, of course, on a trip like this. This is, you got to go to the bathroom, a little too much iodine in your water purification tablet. Here's a shovel, and there's the woods. You know, take a walk. Make sure it's 200 feet from the water or any campsites. Dig yourself a hole and go for it. Well, that's roughing it. So they did it. And they prepared the best they could for it. What they didn't prepare for in the first couple of days is once they get out there, dig a hole, find a place to, you know, lean against a tree or whatever, and then drop the pants. Oh, I don't spray that for with mosquito repellent, do I? No, you don't. Well, you better hurry up and get the job done here, because unprotected skin available for mosquito feasting, and the mosquitoes don't appear to care if they eat where you crap. So they go to town there, and you can't really just be slapping around willy-nilly there either. So a very rude awakening for a lot of them. And so I guess I don't know whether I don't know if it even works, but I guess the advice would be bring a can of repellent with you. But are you willing to spray yourself? I don't know. Anyway, they had a lot of improvised workarounds, but I don't know how well they do on the radio. So go on a trip like this yourself, or send one of your kids and get the reports back. That I heard. Good time? Yeah. Worth going? Uh-huh. So everything okay? Uh-huh. Get any mosquito bites? Yeah, and you'll never believe where I got them. Whoa. Okay, well, that came out pretty easily. Okay, so in the news, the real news, we've got more to discuss. Oh, by the way, we'll ponder this one. I don't know whether I can really answer this one off the bat, or whether it would be better to have Greg react to this one tomorrow. But Gideon notes, IEM is showing a 30% chance for Trump to win the popular vote, which is discouraging. Do you agree? I'll help with the second half. I agree that is discouraging. Now, as for the quantitative analysis, well, remember, we always have to figure some chance in there, right? And I think we've seen something in the order of 20% chance being discussed in the last couple of weeks. So 30 would be up from 20. Not sure what the IEM methodology is, but we'll leave that one out there for Greg's commentary perhaps tomorrow. And move on instead to, well, my own version, I guess, of the news roundup. Here's what we got out here. I'm going to lay out what is in pocket, and we'll take a dive into one or another of the areas as time permits. Let's see. Trump stories aplenty, including, well, Brian Beutler has a piece in the New Republic, the headline of which is something we've already discussed, so I'll just read it out in terms of reinforcing our own narrative. Trump has made America more racist. Republicans are okay with that, although it was tweeted out with the line that basically what he means by this is Trump has made it more acceptable to be overtly racist and to make overtly racist comments in America. And that's probably the best parallel I've seen as between the Trump phenomenon here and the Brexit phenomenon over there, where at least all the stories are that is the case, that overt racism is somehow more commonplace, if not necessarily more accepted. We also have the rather remarkable headline at Mother Jones, which I'll radio edit a little bit, is it David Cornpiece, Donald Trump and the politics of being an a-hole. That's the kind of headlines we get now. Don't tell me this is a traditional election. The McKay Coppins piece. Everybody continues to say that's rather amazing, as is the other hot piece of the morning, if I can find it here. There we are, in the New Yorker. Jane Meyer, always good. Donald Trump's ghostwriter tells all. Interesting for a number of reasons. The tell-all part, of course, but also the ghostwriter. What did he ghostwrite? Art of the Deal. He didn't even write Art of the Deal. I mean, I don't think anybody really, looking back on it, I don't know if anybody really thinks that he did, but it's still represented as his book, and that was probably ridiculous from the start. Reading it, I never did, but anybody who read it and said it's a coherent narrative of any kind must have then noticed, but the man who says he wrote it can't put together a coherent sentence. This can't be right. He outsources everything. I don't think that should surprise us entirely. Another comment from Gideon here, maybe Trump is helped by Democratic activists not calling out the racism. It certainly has got to help, I suppose, him do that. And I don't know. I mean, to the extent that Democratic activists don't call it out, I gather that's helpful. I don't see that in short supply, but there are definitely some people who want to remain above the fray to a certain extent and think, I guess the closer you are to Hillary Clinton, the more you have to pretend you're running a real race against a regular person, although I can't. I share the frustration. I'm not really sure what the thinking is, if that's happening. Maybe they're just loath to say anyone's racist because they calculate that by saying X is racist, that provokes a backlash among conservatives who are, of course, themselves racist, but consider themselves not to be racist, and it gives opportunity to hit the media and get quoted with, playing the race card, blah, blah, blah. They're constantly accusing everyone of being racist. It's the same old. I don't know. But I don't know. I think I see, I don't know. To me, it appears that fewer people are holding their tongue. But Gideon was just sort of commenting on the general trend. Normally, yeah, you're right. People are not, as you said, people are not sure who they're talking to, so they keep quiet in public. I think there's a not quite equal in weight and volume, but a complementary feeling of freedom among the Trump opponents in the general public to simply come out and say either that they hate Donald Trump personally, politically, or what have you, much more freely than usual. Everybody keeps pointing to this Jane Meyer thing here, so I better get to it. As a matter of fact, let's see. I just see somebody else saying, great piece by Jane Meyer. It's over and over and over. Kate Sherrill just tweeted, yesterday, the New Yorker Radio Hour podcast posted Trump's remorseful ghostwriter a 20-plus minute interview about his experience. So if the New Yorker Radio podcast is going to put 20 minutes into it, it's okay for us to put an hour into it if we need to. But I really do want to round up a bunch of other things as well. The 60 Minutes interview was astonishing, though I suspect, on balance, as between reviewing the 60 Minutes thing, which I did not see all of, but saw instead in bits and pieces and watched people react to, versus the Jane Meyer thing. The Jane Meyer thing is hotter, newer, and everybody's talking about it, and you may have already seen 60 Minutes. The thing I pulled away from the 60 Minutes, besides all the quotes, was those insane Uday and Kusei gold leaf chairs that they sat in, which was ridiculous on 10,000 levels. Plus, of course, the general dynamic of it all, like Pence is barely there. Anyway, so much concentration on Trump that I feel like I need to go over to the Meyer piece right away. Other things that are out there worth considering, I guess if I don't get back to the McKay Coppins piece, I wanted to at least mention that the general gist of the piece, it's not all about how McKay Coppins is upset that people blame him for Donald Trump running. It is used, though, as a launching pad into a much more interesting piece, although that's a very interesting part of the puzzle. But he takes that and runs a little bit more with it. In other words, he realizes the time Trump is putting into bashing him, McKay Coppins, for having written a bad piece about, or what he thought was a bad piece, a good piece, writing unfavorably about him. Wasn't all that unusual. I think Coppins was caught by surprise. What is this guy spending so much time on me for? I mean, there's a million pieces out there that say Donald Trump is, a total jackass. Why doesn't he focus on some of those? Plenty of people say worse stuff than I do. But he uncovers really in that incident, plus all the background learning and reporting that he did about Trump in the course of writing his profile, he finds a recurring pattern wherein Trump is chiefly motivated, it seems, by revenge, a desire to get back at people who have said that he's anything less than he imagines himself to be, and that he's going to get back at them, and it's all a revenge story, which is awful when it comes to giving people, say, nuclear codes. All right. I'm curious myself about this Jane Meyer piece, so let's go that way. Donald Trump's ghostwriter tells all. The subtitle here, The Art of the Deal, made America see Trump as a charmer with an unfailing knack for business. Tony Schwartz helped create that myth, and he regrets it. Last June, as dusk fell outside Tony Schwartz's sprawling house on a leafy back road in Riverdale, New York, he pulled out his laptop and caught up with the day's big news. Donald J. Trump had declared his candidacy for president. As Schwartz watched a video of the speech, he began to feel personally implicated. So interesting. The guy who wrote his book and did his best to make Donald Trump sound good feels like he's personally responsible for Trump's candidacy. And the guy who wrote a negative profile and said that Donald Trump was a total jackass also feels personally responsible for his run for the presidency. So I should suspect that maybe that will make each of you feel a little bit better. Trump, facing a crowd that had gathered in the lobby of Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue, laid out his qualifications, saying, "We need a leader that wrote The Art of the Deal." If so, Schwartz thought, then he, not Trump, should be running. Schwartz dashed off a tweet. "Many thanks, Donald Trump, for suggesting I run for president based on the fact that I wrote The Art of the Deal." Schwartz had, in fact, ghostwritten Trump's 1987 breakthrough memoir, earning a joint byline on the cover, so not entirely ghosted, I guess. Half of the book's $500,000 advance and half the royalties, which is how he has that nice house in Riverdale, I guess. So he's not suffering all by himself in poverty anywhere, that's for sure. The book was a phenomenal success, spending 48 weeks on the Times bestseller list, 13 of them at number 1. More than 1 million copies have been bought, generating several $1 million in royalties. The book expanded Trump's renown far beyond New York City, making him an emblem of the successful tycoon. Edward Costner, the former editor and publisher of New York, where Schwartz worked as a writer at the time, said Tony created Trump. He's Dr. Frankenstein. Starting in late 1985, Schwartz spent 18 months with Trump, camping out in his office. joining him on his helicopter, tagging along at meetings, and spending weekends with him at his Manhattan apartment and his Florida estate. During that period, Schwartz felt he had got to know him better than almost anyone else outside the Trump family. Until Schwartz posted the tweet, though, he had not spoken publicly about Trump for decades. It had never been his ambition to be a ghostwriter, and he had been glad to move on. But as he watched a replay of the new candidate holding forth for 45 minutes, he noticed something strange. Over the decades, Trump appeared to have convinced himself that he had written the book. Schwartz recalls thinking, if he could lie about that on day one, when it was so easily refuted, he is likely to lie about anything. True. It seemed improbable that Trump's campaign would succeed, so Schwartz told himself that he didn't worry much. Whoops, we all did that. But as Trump denounced Mexican immigrants as rapists, near the end of his speech, Schwartz felt anxious. He had spent hundreds of hours observing Trump first tiny hand, and felt that he had an unusually deep understanding of what he regarded as Trump's beguiling strengths and disqualifying weaknesses. Many Americans, however, saw Trump as a charmingly brash entrepreneur with an unfailing knack for business. Well, he's got a knack for failing business anyway. A mythical image that Schwartz had helped create. It pays to trust your instincts, Trump says in the book, adding that he was set to make hundreds of millions of dollars after buying a hotel that he hadn't even walked through. In the subsequent months, as Trump defied predictions by establishing himself as the front-runner for the Republican nomination, Schwartz's desire to set the record straight grew. Too late, dude. He had long since left journalism to launch the Energy Project, a consulting firm that promises to improve employees' productivity by helping them boost their physical, emotional, and mental and spiritual morale. It was a successful company with clients such as Facebook. I've just started watching Silicon Valley, so not surprising. And Schwartz's colleagues urged him to avoid the political fray, but the prospect of President Trump terrified him. It wasn't because of Trump's ideology. Schwartz doubted that he had one. The problem was Trump's personality, which he considered pathologically impulsive and self-centered. Yes, we all feel this. Schwartz thought about publishing an article describing his reservations about Trump, but he hesitated, knowing that, since he'd cashed in on the flattering art of the deal, his credibility and motives would be seen as suspect. Yet, watching the campaign was excruciating. Schwartz decided that if he kept mum and Trump was elected, he'd never forgive himself. In June, he agreed to break his silence and give his first candid interview about the Trump he got to know while acting as his Boswell. I put lipstick on a pig, he said. I felt a deep sense of remorse that I contributed to presenting Trump in a way that brought him wider attention and made him more appealing than he is. He went on, I genuinely believe that if Trump wins and gets the nuclear codes, there's an excellent possibility it will lead to the end of civilization. What an excellent possibility. I see what you mean, but okay, I'm worried too. If he were writing The Art of the Deal today, Schwartz said it would be a very different book with a very different title. Asked what he would call it, he answered, The Sociopath. Of course, it wouldn't be published that way because that would not be the deal. Anyway, the idea of Trump writing an autobiography didn't originate with either Trump or Schwartz. It began with Cy Newhouse, the media magnate whose company, Advance Publications, get it, owned Random House at the time and continues to own Condé Nast, the parent company of the magazine. It was very definitely and almost uniquely Cy Newhouse's idea. Peter Osnos, who edited the book, recalls, GQ, which Condé Nast also owns, had published a cover story on Trump, and Newhouse noticed that the newsstand sales had been, stales probably true, unusually strong. Newhouse called Trump about the project, then visited him to discuss it. Random House continued the pursuit with a series of meetings. At one point, Howard Kaminsky, who ran Random House then, wrapped a thick Russian novel in a dummy cover that featured a photograph of Trump looking like a conquering hero. At the top was Trump's name in large gold block lettering. That was probably the seller right there. Kaminsky recalls that Trump was pleased by the mock-up, but had one suggestion, please make my name much bigger. After securing the $500,000 advance, Trump signed a contract. Only $500,000? What a loser. Around the same time, Schwartz, who was one of the leading young magazine writers of the day, stopped by Trump's office in Trump Tower. Schwartz had written about Trump before. In 1985, he'd published a piece in New York called A Different Kind of Donald Trump Story, which portrayed him not as a brilliant mogul, but as a ham-fisted thug who had unsuccessfully tried to evict rent-controlled and rent-stabilized tenants from a building that he had bought on Central Park South. Trump's efforts, which included a plan to house homeless people in the building in order to harass the tenants, became what Schwartz described as a fugue of failure, a farce of fumbling and bumbling. An accompanying cover portrait depicted Trump as unshaven, unpleasant-looking, and shiny with sweat. Yet, to Schwartz's amazement, Trump loved the article. He hung the cover on the wall of his office and sent a fan note to Schwartz on his gold-embossed personal stationery. Everybody seems to have read it, Trump enthused in the note, which Schwartz has kept. I was shocked, Schwartz told me. Trump didn't fit any model of human being I'd ever met. He was obsessed with publicity and he didn't care what you wrote. How about that, McKay? I wonder. He went on. Trump takes only two positions. Either you're a scummy loser, liar, whatever, or you're the greatest. I became the greatest. He wanted to be seen as a tough guy, and he loved being on the cover. I could see that. Schwartz wrote him back saying, of all the people I've written about over the years, you are certainly the best sport. And so Schwartz had returned for more, this time to conduct an interview for Playboy. You know about that. But to his frustration, Trump kept making cryptic, monosyllabic statements. He mysteriously wouldn't answer my questions, because he wasn't really genuinely pleased probably with the article, but whatever. After 20 minutes, he said Trump explained that he didn't want to reveal anything new about himself. He had just signed a lucrative book deal and needed to save his best material. Like right then and there. I might run out of words. What kind of book? Schwartz said. My autobiography, Trump replied. You're only 38. You don't have one yet, Schwartz joked. Yeah, I know, Trump said. If I were you, Schwartz recalls telling him, I'd write a book called The Art of the Deal. That's something people would be interested in. You're right, Trump agreed. Do you want to write it? You just did. Schwartz thought it over for several weeks. He knew that he would be making a Faustian bargain. A lifelong liberal, he was hardly an admirer of Trump's ruthless and single-minded pursuit of profit. And it was one of a number of times of my life when I was divided between the devil and the higher side, he told me. He had grown up in a bourgeois intellectual family in Manhattan and had attended elite private schools. Trump hates him already. But he was not as wealthy as some of his classmates, and unlike many of them, he had no trust fund. Aha. I grew up privileged, he said, but my parents made it clear you're on your own. Around the time Trump made his offer, Schwartz's wife, Deborah Pines, became pregnant with their second daughter, and he worried that the family wouldn't fit into their Manhattan apartment, whose mortgage was already too high. I was overly worried about money, Schwartz said. I thought money would keep me safe and secure, or that was my rationalization. At the same time, he knew that if he took Trump's money and adopted Trump's voice, his journalism career would be badly damaged. His heroes were such literary nonfiction writers as Tom Wolfe, John McPhee, and David Halberstam. Being a ghostwriter was hack work. In the end, though, Schwartz had his price. He told Trump that if he would give him half the advance and half the book's royalties, he'd take the job. By the way, he said yes to that. Mr. Art of the Deal says yes. That is amazing. The first deal out of the box on the Art of the Deal is, yeah, I'll give you half of everything. On my own autobiography. Such terms are unusually generous for a ghostwriter. Trump, despite having a reputation as a tough negotiator, agreed on the spot. It was a huge windfall, Schwartz recalls, but I knew I was selling out. Literally, the term was invented to describe what I did. Soon, Spy magazine was calling him former journalist Tony Schwartz. Schwartz thought that The Art of the Deal would be an easy project. The book's structure would be simple. He'd chronicle half a dozen or so of Trump's biggest real estate deals, dispense some bromides about how to succeed in business, and fill in Trump's life story. For research, he planned to interview Trump on a series of Saturday mornings. The first session didn't go as planned, however. After Trump gave him a tour of his marble and gilt apartment atop Trump Tower, which to Schwartz looked unlived in, like the lobby of a hotel, they began to talk. But the discussion was soon hobbled by what Schwartz regards as one of Trump's most essential characteristics. He has no attention span. In those days, Schwartz recalled, Trump was generally affable with reporters, offering short, amusingly immodest quotes on demand. Trump had been forthcoming with him during the New York interview, but it hadn't required much time or deep reflection. For the book, though, Trump needed to provide him with sustained, thoughtful recollections. He asked Trump to describe his childhood in detail. After sitting for only a few minutes in his suit and tie, Trump became impatient and irritable. He looked fidgety, Schwartz recalls, like a kindergartner who can't sit still in a classroom. Even when Schwartz pressed him, Trump seemed to remember almost nothing of his youth and made it clear that he was bored. Far more quickly than Schwartz had expected, Trump ended the meeting. Week after week, the pattern repeated itself. Schwartz tried to limit the sessions to smaller increments of time, but Trump's contributions remained oddly truncated and superficial. Trump has been written about 1,000 ways from Sunday, but this fundamental aspect of who he is doesn't seem to be fully understood, Schwartz told me. It's implicit in a lot of what people write, but it's never explicit, or at least I haven't seen it. And that is that it's impossible to keep him focused on any topic other than his own self-aggrandizement for more than a few minutes. And even then, Schwartz trailed off, shaking his head in amazement. He regards Trump's inability to concentrate as alarming in a presidential candidate. If he had to be briefed on a crisis in the Situation Room, it's impossible to imagine him paying attention over a long period of time, he said. In a recent phone interview, Trump told me that, to the contrary, he has the skill that matters most in a crisis, the ability to forge compromises. The reason he touted the art of the deal in his announcement, he explained, was that he believes that recent presidents have lacked his toughness and finesse. Look at the trade deficit with China. Look at the Iran deal. I've made a fortune by making deals. I can do that. I do that well. That's what I do. But Schwartz believes that Trump's short attention span, and fingers, has left him with a stunning level of superficial knowledge and plain ignorance. He said that's why he so often prefers TV as his first news source. Information comes in easily digestible sound bites, and often wrong ones, I guess. He added, I seriously doubt that Trump has ever read a book straight through in his adult life. During the 18 months that he observed Trump, Schwartz said he never saw a book on Trump's desk, or elsewhere in his office, or in his apartment. Other journalists have noticed Trump's apparent lack of interest in reading. In May, Megyn Kelly of Fox News asked him to name his favorite book other than the Bible or The Art of the Deal. Trump picked the 1929 novel All Quiet on the Western Front. Evidently suspecting that many years had elapsed since he'd read it, Kelly asked Trump to talk about the most recent book he'd read. I read passages. I read areas. I'll read chapters. I don't have the time, Trump said. As the New Republic recently noted, this attitude is not shared by most U.S. presidents, including Barack Obama, a habitual consumer of current books, and George W. Bush, who reportedly engaged in a fiercely competitive book-reading contest with his political advisor, Karl Rove. It's a whole other issue. Trump's first wife, Ivana, famously claimed that Trump kept a copy of Adolf Hitler's collected speeches, My New Order, in a cabinet beside his bed. That is unusual. In 1990, Trump's friend Marty Davis, who was then an executive at Paramount, added credence to the story, telling Marie Brenner of Vanity Fair that he had given Trump the book, which is also unusual. I thought he would find it interesting. Davis told her. When Brenner asked Trump about it, however, he mistakenly identified the volume as a different work by Hitler, Mein Kampf. Apparently, he had not so much as read the title. If I had these speeches, and I'm not saying that I do, I would never read them, Trump told Brenner. Growing desperate, Schwartz devised the strategy for trapping Trump into giving more material. He made plans to spend the weekend with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, his mansion at Palm Beach, the Pervalago, as I now call it, where there would be fewer distractions, like bikini ladies. As they chatted in the garden, Ivana icily walked by, clearly annoyed that Schwartz was competing for her husband's limited free time. Trump again grew impatient. Long before lunch on Saturday, Schwartz recalls Trump essentially threw a fit. He stood up and announced that he couldn't stand any more questions. Schwartz went into his room, called his literary agent, Kathy Robbins, and told her that he couldn't do the book. Robbins confirms this. As Schwartz headed back to New York, though, he came up with another plan. He would propose eavesdropping on Trump's life by following him around on the job, and more important, by listening in on his office phone calls. That way, extracting extended reflections from Trump would not be required. When Schwartz presented the idea to Trump, he loved it, because he has no regard for the people he's doing business with. Almost every day from then on, Schwartz sat about 8 feet away from him in the Trump Tower office, listening on an extension of Trump's phone line, Schwartz says that none of the bankers, lawyers, brokers, and reporters who called Trump realized that they were being monitored. The calls usually didn't last long, and Trump's assistant facilitated the conversation hopping. While he was talking with someone, she often came in with a Post-it note informing him of who the next caller was on hold. He was playing people, Schwartz recalls. On the phone with business associates, Trump would flatter, bully, and occasionally get mad, but always in a calculated way. Before the discussion ended, Trump would share the news of his latest success, Schwartz says. Instead of saying goodbye at the end of the call, Trump customarily signed off with, "You're the greatest." There was not a single call that Trump deemed too private for Schwartz to hear. He loved the attention, Schwartz recalled. If he could have had 300,000 people listening in, he would have been even happier. This year, Schwartz has heard some argue that there must be a more thoughtful and nuanced version of Donald Trump that he is keeping in reserve for after the campaign. There isn't, Schwartz insists. There is no private Trump. This is not a matter of hindsight. While working on The Art of the Deal, Schwartz kept a journal in which he expressed his amazement at Trump's personality. Publish that, please. Writing that Trump seemed driven entirely by a need for public attention. All he is stomp, stomp, stomp. Recognition from outside, bigger, more. A whole series of things that go nowhere in particular, he observed on October 21st, 1986. But as he noted in the journal a few days later, the book will be far more successful if Trump is a sympathetic character, even weirdly sympathetic, than if he is just hateful, or worse yet, a one-dimensional blowhard. Eavesdropping solved the interview problem, but it presented a new one. After hearing Trump's discussions about business on the phone, Schwartz asked him brief follow-up questions. He then tried to amplify the material he had gotten from Trump by calling others involved in the deals, but their accounts often directly conflicted with Trump's. Lying is second nature to him, Schwartz said. More than anyone else I've ever met, Trump has the ability to convince himself that whatever he's saying at any given moment is true, or sort of true, or at least ought to be true. Often, Schwartz said, the lies that Trump told him were about money, how much he had paid for something, or what a building he owned was worth, or how much one of his casinos was earning when it was actually on its way to bankruptcy. Trump bragged that he paid only $8 million for Mar-a-Lago, but omitted that he bought a nearby strip of beach for a record sum. After gossip columns reported erroneously that Prince Charles was considering buying several apartments in Trump Tower, Trump implied that he had no idea where the rumor had started. It certainly didn't hurt us, he says in The Art of the Deal. Wayne Barrett, a reporter for the Village Voice, later revealed that Trump himself had planted the story with journalists. This corroborates everything. Schwartz also suspected that Trump engaged in such media tricks and asked him about a story making the rounds, that Trump often called up news outlets using a pseudonym. Trump didn't deny it. As Schwartz recalls, he smirked and said, "You like that, don't you?" We know that story too. The John Barron and John Miller or whatever. Schwartz says of Trump, he lied strategically. He had a complete lack of conscience about it. Since most people are constrained by the truth, Trump's indifference to it gave him a strange advantage. What a great advantage that would be in politics, wouldn't it? It seems to be working. Amazing. When challenged about the facts, Schwartz says, Trump would often double down, we've seen it, repeat himself, we've seen it, and grow belligerent, we've seen it. This quality was recently on display after Trump posted on Twitter a derogatory image of Hillary Clinton that contained the six-pointed star, right, lifted from a white supremacist website. Campaign staffers took the image down. 2 days later, Trump angrily defended it, insisting there was no anti-Semitic implication. Whenever the thin veneer of Trump's vanity is challenged, Schwartz says, he overreacts, not an ideal quality in a head of state. True. When Schwartz began writing The Art of the Deal, he realized that he needed to put an acceptable face on Trump's loose relationship with the truth. So he concocted an artful euphemism, writing in Trump's voice. And when was the last time I thought it was somebody writing in Trump's voice? So the guy who was hired to write the materials for Trump University, right? There was a great article we read a while back about that one. Anyway, I guess a lot of people have to do that. Writing in Trump's voice, he explained to the reader, and we've parsed this as one of his own comments. Interesting. We now find out this is something that Schwartz made up. Remember this one? I play to people's fantasies. People want to believe that something is the biggest and the greatest and the most spectacular. I call it truthful hyperbole. I knew he didn't know the word hyperbole. It's an innocent form of exaggeration. It's a very effective form of promotion. Schwartz now disavows the passage. Deceit, he told me, is never innocent. He added, truthful hyperbole is a contradiction in terms. It's a way of saying it's a lie, but who cares? Trump, he said, loved the phrase. Just couldn't come up with it on his own. In his journal, Schwartz describes the process of trying to make Trump's voice palatable in the book. It was a kind of a trick, he writes, to mimic Trump's blunt, staccato, no apologies delivery while making him seem almost boyishly appealing. One strategy was to make it appear that Trump was just having fun at the office. I try not to take any of what's happened too seriously, Trump says in the book. The real excitement is playing the game. In his journal, Schwartz wrote, Trump stands for many of the things I abhor. His willingness to run over people, the gaudy, tacky, gigantic obsessions, the absolute lack of interest in anything beyond power and money. Looking back at the text now, Schwartz says, I created a character far more winning than Trump actually is. The first line of the book is an example. I don't do it for the money, Trump declares. I've got enough, much more than I'll ever need. I do it to do it. Deals are my art form. Other people paint beautifully on canvas or write wonderful poetry. I like making deals, preferably big deals. That's how I get my kicks. Schwartz now laughs at this depiction of Trump as a devoted artisan. Of course he's in it for the money, he said. One of the most deep and basic needs he has is to prove that I'm richer than you. As for the idea that making deals is a form of poetry, Schwartz says, he was incapable of saying something like that. It wouldn't even be in his vocabulary. He saw Trump as driven not by a pure love of deal-making, but by an insatiable hunger for money, praise, and celebrity. Often, after spending the day with Trump and watching him pile one hugely expensive project atop another, atop the next, like a circus performer spinning plates, Schwartz would go home and tell his wife he's living in a black hole. Schwartz reminded himself that he was being paid to tell Trump's story, not his own, but the more he worked on the project, the more disturbing he found it. In his journal, he describes the hours he spent with Trump as draining and deadening. Schwartz told me that Trump's need for attention is completely compulsive, and that his bid for the presidency is part of a continuum. That's what McKay is saying over in the other article. He's managed to keep increasing the dose for 40 years, Schwartz said. That's bad news. It's only going to get worse. After he'd spent decades as a tabloid titan, the only thing left was running for president. If he could run for emperor of the world, he would. Rhetorically, Schwartz's aim in The Art of the Deal was to present Trump as a hero of every chapter, the hero of every chapter, but after looking into some of his supposedly brilliant deals, Schwartz concluded that there were cases in which there was no way to make Trump look good. So he sidestepped unflattering incidents and details. I didn't consider it my job to investigate, he says. Okay, fair enough. Schwartz also tried to avoid the strong whiff of cronyism that hovered over some of those deals. In 1986, in his journal, he describes what a challenge it was to put his best foot forward in writing about one of Trump's first triumphs, his development, starting in 1975, of the Grand Hyatt Hotel on the site of the former Commodore Hotel next to Grand Central Terminal. In order to afford the hotel, Trump required an extremely large tax abatement. Richard Ravitch, who was then in charge of the agency that had the authority to grant such tax breaks to developers, recalls that he declined to grant the abatement, and Trump got so unpleasant, I had to tell him to get out. Trump got it anyway, largely because key city officials had received years of donations from his father, Fred Trump, who was a major real estate developer in Queens. Wayne Barrett, who's reporting for The Voice, informed his definitive 1991 book, Trump, the Deals and the Downfall, says it was all Fred's political connections that created the abatement. In addition, Trump snookered rivals into believing that he had an exclusive option from the city on the project when he didn't. Trump also deceived his partner in the deal, Jay Pritzker, the head of the Hyatt hotel chain. Yowza, Pritzker. Pritzker had rejected an unfavorable term proposed by Trump, but at the closing, Trump forced it through, knowing that Pritzker was on a mountain in Nepal and could not be reached. Schwartz wrote in his journal that almost everything about the hotel deal had an immoral cast, but as the ghostwriter, He was trying to find a way around behavior that he considered, if not reprehensible, then at least morally questionable. Many tall tales that Trump told Schwartz contained a kernel of truth, but made him out to be cleverer than he was. One of Trump's favorite stories was about how he had tricked the company that owned Holiday Inn into becoming his partner in an Atlantic City casino. Trump claimed that he had quieted executives' fears of construction delays by ordering his construction supervisor to make a vacant lot that he owned look like the most active construction site in the history of the world. As Trump tells it in The Art of the Deal, there were so many dump trucks and bulldozers pushing around dirt and filling holes that had been just dug that when Holiday Inn executives visited the site, it looked as if it were in the midst of building the Grand Coulee Dam. The stunt, Trump claimed, pushed the deal through. After the book came out, though, a consultant for Trump's casinos, Al Glasgow, who is now deceased, told Schwartz it never happened. There may have been one or two trucks, but not the fleet that made it a great story. Although now that does remind me of the Trump Baja story about how people kept seeing dirt being pushed around on a vacant lot. So maybe it's a trick that he tried to replicate from time to time. Schwartz tamped down some of Trump's swagger, but plenty of it remained. Oh boy, imagine that. It's tamped down, huh? The manuscript that Random House published was, depending on your perspective, either entertainingly insightful or shamelessly self-aggrandizing. Both, of course. To borrow a title from Norman Mailer, who frequently attended prize fights at Trump's Atlantic City hotels, the book could have been called Advertisements for Myself. In 2005, Timothy L. O'Brien, an award-winning journalist who is currently the executive editor of Bloomberg View, published Trump Nation, a meticulous investigative biography. Ooh, my. Trump unsuccessfully sued him for libel. Pretty telling. O'Brien has taken a close look at The Art of the Deal, and he told me that it might be best characterized as a non-fiction work of fiction. Trump's life story, as told by Schwartz, honestly chronicled a few setbacks, such as Trump's disastrous 1983 purchase of the New Jersey Generals, a football team in the failing USFL. But O'Brien believes that Trump used the book to turn almost every step of his life, both personal and professional, into a glittering fable. Some of the falsehoods in The Art of the Deal are minor. Spy upended Trump's claims that Ivana had been a top model and an alternate on the Czech Olympic ski team. Barrett notes that in The Art of the Deal, Trump describes his father as having been born in New Jersey to Swedish parents. In fact, he was born in the Bronx, not so bad off after New Jersey, but to German parents. Why? Decades later, Trump spread falsehoods about Obama's origins, claiming it was possible that the president was born in Africa. And now, of course, the Pocahontas thing. In The Art of the Deal, Trump portrays himself as a warm family man with endless admirers. He praises Ivana's taste and business skill. I said, you can't bet against Ivana, and she's proved me right. But Schwartz noticed little warmth or communication between Trump and Ivana, and he later learned that while The Art of the Deal was being written, Trump began an affair with Marla Maples, who became his second wife. He divorced Ivana in 1992. As far as Schwartz could tell, Trump spent very little time with his family and had no close friends. In The Art of the Deal, Trump describes Roy Cohn, his personal lawyer, yes, that Roy Cohn, in the warmest terms, calling him the sort of guy who'd be there at your hospital bed, literally standing by you to the death. Cohn, who in the 50s assisted Senator Joseph McCarthy in his vicious crusade against communism, was closeted. He felt abandoned by Trump when he became fatally ill from AIDS and said, "Donald pisses ice water." Schwartz says of Trump, he'd like people when they were helpful and turn on them when they weren't. It wasn't personal. He's a transactional man. It was all about what you could do for him. Gimmitarianism, right? So the thing he loved about Roy Cohn was his loyalty, but screw him. According to Barrett, among the most misleading aspects of The Art of the Deal was an idea that Trump made it largely on his own with only minimal help from his father, Fred. Barrett, in his book, notes that Trump once declared, "The working man likes me because he knows I didn't inherit what I built." Oh, my God. And that in The Art of the Deal, he derides wealthy heirs as members of the Lucky Sperm Club, which is, I think, something he got from Howard Stern. Trump's self-portrayal as a Horatio Alger figure has buttressed his popular appeal in 2016, but his origins were hardly humble, as everyone knows, I think. Fred's fortune, based on his ownership of middle-income properties, wasn't glamorous, but it was sizable. In 2003, a few years after Fred died, Trump and his siblings reportedly sold some of their father's real estate holdings for $500 million. In The Art of the Deal, Trump cites his father as the most important influence on me, but in telling his father's main legacy was teaching him the importance of toughness. In his telling, that it would be. Beyond that, Schwartz said, Trump barely talked about his father. He didn't want his success to be seen as having anything to do with him. But when Barrett investigated, he found that Trump's father was instrumental in his son's rise, financially and politically. In the book, Trump says that my energy and my enthusiasm explain how, as a 29-year-old with few accomplishments, he acquired the Grand Hyatt Hotel. Barrett reports, however, that Trump's father had to co-sign many of the contracts that the deal required. And, of course, we've since learned small loan of $1 million, buying $3 million worth of chips at the casinos, etc. This article here continues. He also lent Trump $7.5 million to get started as a casino owner in Atlantic City. At one point, when Trump couldn't meet payments on other loans, his father tried to tide him over by sending a lawyer to buy $3 million worth of gambling chips. Barrett told me Donald did make some smart moves himself, particularly in assembling the site for the Trump Tower. That was a stroke of genius. Nonetheless, he said, the notion that he's a self-made man is a joke. But I guess they couldn't call the book The Art of My Father's Deals. Although that would be an interesting blend of his book with Obama's, title-wise anyway. The other key myth perpetuated by The Art of the Deal was that Trump's intuitions about business were almost flawless. The book helped fuel the notion that he couldn't fail, Barrett said, but unbeknown to Schwartz and the public, by late 1987, when the book came out, Trump was heading toward what Barrett calls simultaneous personal and professional self-destruction. O'Brien agrees that during the next several years, Trump's life unraveled. The divorce from Ivana reportedly cost him $25 million. Meanwhile, he was in the midst of what O'Brien calls a crazy shopping spree that resulted in unmanageable debt. He was buying the Plaza Hotel and also planning to erect the tallest building in the world on the former rail yard that he bought on the west side. In 1987, the city denied him permission to construct such a tall skyscraper, but in The Art of the Deal, he brushed off this failure with a one-liner, I can afford to wait. Oh, I don't think it ever happened, right? O'Brien says the reality is that he couldn't afford to wait. He was telling the media that the carrying costs were $3 million when, in fact, they were more like $20 million. Trump was also building a third casino in Atlantic City, the Taj, which he promised would be the biggest casino in history. He bought the Eastern Airlines shuttle that operated out of New York, Boston, and Washington, rechristening it the Trump Shuttle. Brilliant. And acquiring a giant yacht, the Trump Princess. He was on a total run of complete and utter self-absorption. Self-absorption. Good pronunciation. Barrett said, adding, it's kind of like now. Schwartz said that when he was writing the book, the greatest percentage of Trump's assets was in casinos, and he made it sound like each casino was more successful than the last. But every one of them was failing. He went on, I think he was just spinning. I don't think he could have believed it at the time. He was losing millions of dollars a day. He had to have been terrified. Now, maybe that's a presidential quality, right? He's terrified, but makes it look like he's supremely confident. In 1992, the journalist David K. Johnston, that would be David K. Johnston. I have to tell you, I guess I'll have to remember, we have to use the David K. Johnston voice that we love on this show if he's quoted. He published a book about the casinos, casinos in general, Temples of Chance, and cited a net worth statement from 1990 that assessed Trump's personal wealth. It showed that Trump owed nearly $300 million more to his creditors than his assets were worth. He's poorer than you. But, of course, he lived in opulence because the system is rigged. He's right about that part. It's just not rigged the way he says it is. The next year, his company was forced into bankruptcy, the first of 6 such instances. The Trump meteor had crashed. But in The Art of the Deal, O'Brien told me Trump shrewdly and unabashedly promoted an image of himself as a deal-maker non-pariah, who could get away with the best out of every situation, and who could now deliver America from its malaise. This idealized version was presented to an exponentially larger audience, O'Brien noted, when Mark Burnett, the reality television producer, read The Art of the Deal and decided to base a new show on it, The Apprentice, with Trump as the star. The first season of the show, which premiered in 2004, opens with Trump in the back of a limousine boasting, "I've mastered the art of the deal, and I've turned the name Trump into the highest quality brand." An image of the book's cover flashes on screen as Trump explains that as the master, he's now seeking an apprentice. O'Brien said the apprentice is myth-making on steroids. This is a straight line from the book to the show to the 2016 campaign. So it's Mark Burnett's fault. That's another person who has to shoulder some of the blame. It took Schwartz a little more than a year to write The Art of the Deal. In the spring of 1987, he sent the manuscript to Trump, who returned it to him shortly afterwards because he probably didn't read it. There were a few red marks made with a fat-tipped magic marker, most of which deleted criticisms that Trump had made of powerful individuals he no longer wanted to offend, such as Lee Iacocca. Otherwise, Schwartz said, Trump changed almost nothing. In my phone interview with Trump, he initially said of Schwartz, Tony was very good. There you go. That's the real guy. He's good. He was the co-author. But he dismissed Schwartz's account of the writing process. He didn't write the book. Trump told me, I wrote the book. I wrote the book. It was my book. And it was a #1 bestseller and one of the best-selling business books of all time. Some say it was the best-selling business book ever. It is not. Howard Kaminsky, the former Random House head, laughed and said, Trump didn't write a postcard for us. Trump was far more involved in the book's promotion. He wooed booksellers and made one television appearance after another. He publicly promised to donate his cut of the book's royalties to charity. Didn't. And he even made a surprise trip to New Hampshire, where he stirred additional publicity by floating the possibility that he might run for president. In December of 1987, a month after the book was published, Trump hosted an extravagant book party in the pink marble atrium of Trump Tower. Klieg lights lit a red carpet outside the building. Inside, nearly 1,000 guests in black tie were served champagne and fed slices of giant cake replica of Trump Tower, which was wheeled in by a parade of women waving red sparklers. The boxing, I was going to say, sounds like a boxing match, and so it was. Boxing promoter Don King greeted the crowd in a floor-length mink coat, and comedian Jackie Mason introduced Donald and Ivana with the words, "Here comes the king and queen." Trump toasted Schwartz, saying teasingly that he had at least tried to teach him how to make money. Schwartz got more of an education the next day when he and Trump spoke on the phone. After chatting briefly about the party, Trump informed Schwartz that as his ghostwriter he owed him for half the event's cost, which was in the six figures. Schwartz was dumbfounded. He wanted me to split the cost of entertaining his list of 900 second-rate celebrities. Schwartz had, in fact, learned a few things from watching Trump. He drastically negotiated down the amount he agreed to pay to a few $1,000s. Oh, I should never have. Amazing. I can't believe I thought he would get that money. Then he wrote Trump a letter promising to write a check, not to Trump, but to a charity of Schwartz's choosing. It was a page out of Trump's playbook. Okay, wait a second here. I see. Let's see if I can figure this out. Okay. Schwartz had, in fact, learned a few things from Trump. Okay, so he learned to negotiate the same way as Trump. That's what we're seeing here. He negotiated down the amount he agreed to pay, I guess, for the party, not Trump for the book. And then he wrote Trump a letter promising to write a check not to Trump, but to a charity of Schwartz's choosing. Oh, that's even double the hard-nosed negotiation. It was a page out of Trump's playbook. In the past 7 years, Trump has promised to give millions of dollars to charity, but reporters for the Washington Post found they could only document about $10,000 in donations, and they uncovered no direct evidence that Trump made charitable contributions from money earned by The Art of the Deal, despite, of course, saying everywhere on television that's exactly what he was doing, because he didn't need the money, first line of the book. Not long after the discussion of the party bills, Trump approached Schwartz about writing a sequel, for which Trump had been offered a 7-figure advance. This time, however, he offered Schwartz only a third of the profits. He pointed out that because the advance was much bigger, the payout would be too, but Schwartz said no. Feeling deeply alienated, he instead wrote a book called What Really Matters, about the search for meaning in life. After working with Trump, Schwartz writes, he felt a gnawing emptiness and became a seeker, longing to be connected to something timeless and essential, more real. Schwartz told me that he has decided to pledge all royalties from sales of The Art of the Deal in 2016 to pointedly chosen charities: the National Immigration Law Center, Human Rights Watch, the Center for the Victims of Torture, the National Immigration Forum, and the Tahiri Justice Center. And by the way, I'm sure the list will grow every time Donald Trump singles out and insults and threatens some out group. He now needs to start giving money to their charity to make up for what he's done here, I guess Schwartz feels. He doesn't feel that the gesture absolves him. I'll carry this until the end of my life, he said. There's no writing it, but I like the idea that the more copies that The Art of the Deal sells, the more money I can donate to the people whose rights Trump seeks to abridge. And I think is the best salve I can think of for it. Schwartz expected Trump to attack him for speaking out, and he was correct. Informed that Schwartz had made critical remarks about him and wouldn't be voting for him, Trump said he's probably just doing it for the publicity. He also said, "Wow, that's great disloyalty because I made Tony rich. He owes a lot to me. I helped him when he didn't have 2 cents in his pocket. It's great disloyalty. I guess he thinks it's good for him, but he'll find out it's not good for him." What a brilliant speaker. I guess he thinks it's good, but he'll find out it's not good. It's a little bit of the Jackie in that one. Anyway, minutes after Trump got off the phone with me, Schwartz's cell phone rang. "I hear you're not voting for me," Trump said. "I just talked to the New Yorker, which is, by the way, a failing magazine that no one reads. And I hear you were critical of me." "You're running for president," Schwartz said. "I disagree with a lot of what you're saying." "That's your right, but then you should have just remained silent," which is also your right. "Now that you're under arrest in my regime. I just want to tell you I think you're very disloyal." Why even bother taking this call? Just hang up on him in the middle of that. "Without me, you wouldn't be where you are now. I had a lot of choice of who to write that book, and I chose you, and I was very generous with you. I know that you gave a lot of speeches and lectures using The Art of the Deal. I could have sued you, but I didn't." He's such a baby, my God. I mean, right down to "I'm going to sue you." "My business has nothing to do with The Art of the Deal." "That's not what I've been told. You're running for president of the United States. The stakes are high." "Yeah, they are," he said. "Have a nice life." Trump hung up. Schwartz can understand why Trump feels stung, but he felt that he had to speak up before it was too late. He's right. As for Trump's anger toward him, he said, "I don't take it personally, because the truth is, he didn't mean it personally. People are dispensable and disposable in Trump's world. If Trump is elected president," he warned, "the millions of people who voted for him and believe he represents their interests will learn that anyone who deals closely with him already knows that he couldn't care less about them." And that's it. We read the whole thing, and now you're up to speed on all of that. There's plenty of stuff we skipped, unfortunately, just to get to all of that, but I really felt like you need to hear the whole thing out of that one. Let's see. There is more, as I said. There's McKay Coppins' piece, which also, likewise, very long, but interesting in that it corroborates a lot of it, and that it's a very similar look at what drives him, but it's got there's a lot of different angles and a lot of different information to it. I'll probably share that one with you tomorrow. We'll use the end of the show to try and scoop up a little bit of other stuff. Maybe we can get off of the Trump thing here. Let's see. I mentioned to you that New York Magazine was reporting that Donald Trump may have fired Corey Lewandowski, but he's still taking his advice. I'll provide that for Scott to round up for you in the afternoon post with all of our links. Other things regarding, let's see, the Republican National Convention. I don't think we got to speak on Friday about the release of and then removal of the crazy-looking Trump-Pence logo. But that's old news by now. But speaking of the convention and getting ready for the convention, I was interested in seeing this. Who tweeted this? Alyona Mink, who I think used to be the RT producer, but I think since they went under or revamped I don't forget exactly what they did. She's now moved on and is a host and producer at Huffington Post Live and Huffington Post Video projects. She got this picture, I guess. She must have been on hand at the RNC in Cleveland. A confrontation in the airport between Karl Rove and Alex Jones, who kept calling Rove. Turd Blossom, of course. I thought that was really an interesting thing. So apparently they did. They got in a bit of an argument. But Alex Jones, Aliana's picture is of Alex Jones confronting and videotaping with his phone Rove in the airport, who looks perturbed. But what an amazing development that is. I mean, that really got me. I had to tweet about it last night when I saw it, and I have to clean it up for radio. But, I mean, what I thought was so amazing is here we have a situation wherein you got Karl Rove, who's the man behind the reality-based community comments, that you all live in a reality-based community, but I would like work above and beyond that, and reality-based people are losers, stuck having to deal with facts and judiciously studying what happens, by which time we've moved on to the next thing. Amazing that the guy who, as I said last night, took a giant crap on the reality-based community. I took a giant crap on the reality-based community, and all I got for it was... Now, the expanded version of this is a Republican Party in tatters, completely off the rails and dominated by people who feel no compunction whatsoever to tell the truth or be rooted in it in any way. I mean, I guess Trump considers himself old school and having little to nothing to do with, if it crashes and burns, he will deny all connection whatsoever with the Trump Republican Party. But for the guy who said, yeah, reality has nothing to do with what we do, surprise, this is on you. Much more so than it's on McKay Coppins or Schwartz here or anybody else involved in the last story. The guy who said the Republican Party has no responsibility to be grounded in reality at all. And he's astonished that he's being filmed by Alex Jones. You did Trump. You created Jones. This is all your fault. I hope you drop dead really soon, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, that's not very eloquent, but let's just get right to the point. Because it's 10:51. It's getting towards the end of the show. All right. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, more things to add to the Trump pile. I told you I've got a ton of these things, but let me just go over some of the headlines. And maybe you can even help me tweet to me. Tell me which ones you want to hear over the next couple of days. Let's see. There's a piece in Reuters, The Art of the Spin. Trump bankers question his portrayal of financial comeback. Again, all of a piece here. And that now will be the time over this week where he speaks every night. We're going to have to speak about him every morning, I think. Let's see. Speaking of that Trump-Pence logo, lots of speculation about, all the things that were wrong with it, but all the places where inspiration might have been drawn from it. I am convinced by none of them, but the one that does the most interesting job of juxtaposing it with something that might have inspired it, I don't know. The Aryan Nations logo, of all things. It'd be weird if Trump somehow had people working for him that drew inspiration for part of their communications package from Aryan Nations. But Olivia Nuzzi tweeted the two of them together, and yeah, if you squint at it just right, you can say, okay, well, the T and the P, the way they cross, and Aryan Nations, I'm not even sure where this comes from, but it's got a big, cross-like sword. It's a T, but it's Aryan Nations, A-N, and it crosses the N, but it crosses it in such a way that it's obviously supposed to be evocative of the swastika. I don't know, but it's one of many theories that are out there. I thought I should make you aware of it. Non-Trump related material that has been brought to my attention. I think, let's see. I had a lot of people send me this one. Cheryl sent me this one. Judy Vincent sent this one as well. How a $2 roadside drug test sends innocent people to jail. We will have to get back to non-Trump topics one of these days. Another long read. And another interesting part of our ongoing policing puzzle, now that we are dealing with the aftermath of Baton Rouge on top of Dallas, just needs to be put out there. It's not the police's fault, this one necessarily, but as long as we're talking about systems and rigging, we might as well throw that one out there as well. That plus open carry and the mess it created in Baton Rouge. The secret history of guns, which needs to continue. We have an awful lot of things to try to wrap up into this one. One more Trump scam dangling out there. Donald Trump and kids named in a $250 million tax scam, according to the Daily Beast. So all of that, I guess, still pending. Also, a New York Times piece, Donald Trump's deals rely on being creative with the truth. It seems like everybody is reaching the same conclusions at about the same time. How strange is that? Let's see. Finally, I guess I'll say we'll also toss out there for further discussion some point during this week. We're going to have to get around to the fact that they have finally released some part, anyway, of the infamous 28 pages of the 9/11 Commission reports dealing with the role of one of our other hobby horses here on the show, Saudi Arabia, in the 9/11 attacks. And it's heavily redacted, and all the juicy stuff that you thought was true but haven't really had a chance to get to yet, well, some of it remains yet to be revealed, but certainly plenty more out there in terms of new angles on stories, and some new stories we haven't heard before about just how weird it all was for Americans and Saudis in the hours immediately following 9/11. Some surprises, some confirmations, and, well, a little bit of everything for everyone. Okay, and finally, I guess before we wrap it up and move over to the after show and preview what we've got for you over there, I just will take note. We are right on the brink of hitting our 60th child under 14 years of age accidentally shot to death this year. I believe I think it's pretty obvious we're going to make it before July is over. So once again, the talking point of only about 60 kids under 14 are killed accidentally by guns each year, about to collapse this time in our 7th month. We've had quite a run in July. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 already in July that this has happened to. Has been an amazing rash of 3-year-olds, again, finding guns at home and accidentally shooting themselves, including the son of a cop out in the Steamboat Springs, Colorado area. We'll catch up on all the bad news about that stuff as the week goes on. Right now, though, of course, time to wrap up and time to let you know what we've got in store for you on the after show, because having spent so much time on Donald Trump, surely there's some actual news out there. You can always count on the after show to wrap that stuff up. It is, of course, Metaphor Monday on the after show. You know they like to call it that, and this is the day when they call things what they are. No similes allowed. What a perfect day for the truth about Donald Trump, even though we've already beaten the Donald Trump horse to death. Trump, though, does, in fact, make an appearance in the roundup of stories for the after show. Trump taps Facebook board member Peter Thiel. You know that guy. He's been in the news a couple times over the last few weeks. He'll be speaking, one of the few people that has actually been touted as speaking at the National Convention, Republican Convention, who's going to show up. He'll be speaking as the rest of Silicon Valley runs for the hills. Republican National Convention staffers now scrambling to remove Jim Crow-like white elevator signs throughout the center. It's just the color, but you know how it is over there. They're conscious of the publicity for a reason, because they brought it on themselves, of course. What else? There are also 25 essential items one should pack for the Republican National Convention in the land of Cleve for the last half. What do they got there? They'll be reporting on the 2 men who risked their freedom to expose the murder of Alton Sterling, and the Hubble telescope. Remember that one? The Hubble telescope has just spotted a lonely starburst galaxy far, far away. And, of course, you know what goes along with it, the speed of light and all that. It would be a long, long time ago, wouldn't it? How interesting. I wonder if the humanoids there are finding the droids they're looking for. We'll find out all of that, of course, plus the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community Calendar and more on the after show with Wink and Justice, as we welcome Wink back from his travels to Netroots Nation. By the way, did any of you make it there? Any of you miss it this year like I did? Planning to go next year? Well, let's see. Atlanta next year, right? Netroots Nation 2017. Hope to see you there.
From Daily Coast Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for waiting the extra couple of minutes for me to get back to the microphone. Thank you, Greg, for filling in so that I could get some coffee. Thank you, Bailey's Irish Cream, for making that coffee so delicious and enjoyable. Thank you, Catoctin Creek, for getting me through the weekend, and I suspect a large part of the week to come as we all watch, sort of, the Republican National Convention. See you tomorrow.